Hello comrades, this is the Finnish Bolshevik. A viewer of mine asked if I could debunk Keynesianism and social democracy. So I thought, why not? Let's talk about social democracy. You typically hear pro-social democracy statements from liberals. Those are really the people who talk about it. So, what is social democracy? There is quite a complicated history to the term social democracy because it actually used to mean communism in way back. Marx called himself a communist. The party that Marx and Engels belonged to, or the group, they called themselves the Communist Party or the Communist League. Those are the people who Marx and Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto for. But after that, pretty much during the Second International, the term social democracy began to be widely used to refer to communism because these people, they wanted socialism and democracy. And what is socialism? Socialism is kinda economic democracy, so they wanted not merely democracy as in overthrowing the monarchies, but also economic democracy, so they called themselves social democrats. Even Lenin's party was initially called the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party Bolsheviks. I don't remember the exact year, but it was in the 1920s, I think, when they changed their name to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union Bolsheviks. Maybe it was even the Russian Communist Party Bolsheviks, I don't remember exactly, but in any case, so the term has a complicated history, but why did actual communists abandon the term social democracy? They abandoned the term because they followed Lenin's example. Marx never really liked the term, but he didn't protest it because other people started using it. Lenin thought that the people in the Second International had betrayed the cause, and they had betrayed social democracy, and to separate himself from those people, he suggested that they should change their party's name entirely to, separate themselves from these fake social democrats, these sellout social democrats. So the modern definition of social democracy these days basically means not wanting to overthrow the government, not wanting to overthrow capitalism to create socialism. Instead, they just want a happier capitalism. They think, it's enough if we just get higher wages, if we just get nice social programs, if we can alleviate or minimize the negative impacts of capitalism and try to minimize the crises of capitalism. Now, my criticism of that is that, of course, first of all, it doesn't fix any of the fundamental problems of capitalism. If you look at maybe the classical, most classic examples of social democracy and where social democracy has supposedly worked. So, American liberals, they like to romanticize the Scandinavian countries, and sometimes Finland too. Sweden, Norway, Finland, those are the countries that people often talk about, so, as being successful social democrat countries. We still have many of the fundamental problems of capitalism, so we have capitalist crises, we have recession, all the problems that come with that. We have unemployment, we have, at this point, 10% unemployment, which is not too good at all. It used to be better, but I'll go into that a little in a little bit. Okay, so capitalist crisis, unemployment. We also have homelessness. Homelessness is not a thing in socialism, but it is in social democracy. Finland is one of the countries that has the least amount of homeless people, but we still have 10,000. There is a small enough number of homeless people and a big enough number of charities and other organizations that most of those people can sleep in homeless shelters and places like that. So there's typically not too many people on the streets the way there are, in America or something. But there's still homelessness, and it's not nice. There's exploitation, of course. Workers are still exploited. Workers are not in control. The capitalists run everything. So, all the typical things that come with capitalism are still in social democracy. Social democracy is a bit of a... because it has such a complicated and contradictory history, like the term, it really shouldn't be called social democracy at all. It should be called something like welfare capitalism. And welfare capitalism is a term that some people use, and that is probably the most accurate way to describe it, because it really is just capitalism where the people are given a little bit more. Like in Finland, because the workers struggled against capitalism, and because the Soviet Union was right next door and it was extremely powerful, and the capitalists here wanted to stay in power, they were willing to compromise, and they tried to bribe the workers to keep them from overthrowing the capitalist system entirely. So, what did we get? We got a law that was accepted that states that everybody has the right to health care, and it has to be available regardless of your location, and it used to be free. Nowadays it's not free anymore, but basically universal healthcare, the way they had in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union implemented universal healthcare, so free healthcare for everybody in 1937. So we got something sort of similar to that. Free education. The Soviet Union implemented free education in 1937, so the Finnish capitalists were like, yeah, okay, let's give them free education. Now, the Finnish education system has changed a bunch of times, and even if it was always free, it was always kind of shitty. Like, it used to be really competitive. Like, in the 60s, for example, you would, based on how well you did, you would be sent to, like, the better schools or the shittier schools. Not based on their location. It's quite funny, like, when my mom was explaining this to me, like, how some of her friends, like, were sent to the worse schools, which were much further away from them, while the better school was, like, very close to them, geographically speaking. So it was quite a weird system. But it was changed, and nowadays we have the compulsory education is still free. Until you're 16, you don't have to pay anything. The food is free, the books are free. I mean, you have to buy pencils and things like that. But when you're 16, then you choose between two different kinds of schools. One of them is more theoretical, and the other one is a vocational school. So there you have to buy the books and everything for yourself, but the education is free. And after that, in universities, most universities and things like that are still free or almost free. But you have to buy books and all the other things, and of course you have to take a student loan so you can pay your rent because you're not working because you're studying, or you have to work while you're studying, or you have to come up with some kind of arrangement like that. So it's not the same as it was in the Soviet Union. Like in the Soviet Union, you're covered. Like you don't have to pay anything. You get a house. You just study, you you become an expert in your field, and then you get a job. You're guaranteed a job. Here it's like, you gotta figure out how you can afford to not work while you're studying. The state does actually give you some subsidies, like to sponsor that, but it's never enough. It wasn't enough when I did. Like, the money that I got was ridiculously little. It barely covered, like, the cost of food and public transport that I needed as I was studying. It didn't cover the cost of books, it didn't cover the cost of any of the other things I needed to buy, let alone like rent or things like that. One of the biggest problems, of course, is unemployment. Like, you start to see that social democracy really doesn't solve any of the major problems of capitalism. What it does is, you can see that naturally people in a country like Finland, we're much better off than Americans are. We don't have to take a massive, absolutely astronomical student loan. But we still have to take a student loan, typically. Some people don't. If you live with your parents as you're studying, then maybe not. If it's possible, if your parents live close enough to the school where you study, then maybe not. Or if you just work really hard as you're studying, then maybe you don't need to take a student loan. I was talking with a bunch of comrades about this yesterday, actually, how even though we have universal healthcare, it's not even free. It used to be better, but nowadays it's not free, it's just kinda cheap. And you pay pretty much the same amount of money regardless of what you have. So I guess that's kinda nice. Like, if you have cancer or something, you don't have to pay exorbitant amounts of money for that. But that's not actually true, because you still have to buy the medicine yourself. And depending on your condition, You might have to go to the doctor one time, or you might have to go to the doctor like 100 times during the course of 5 years or something. Like my grandma, for example. She goes to the doctor or to the hospital like all the time to have her heart like checked out. And every time it costs money. Not much, but still the total amount of money is actually quite a lot. And you have to get there somehow. You have to either drive, and if you can't, you gotta use public transport, so that costs money too. And the biggest deal is medicine. You have to buy medicine. And medicine is expensive. The government doesn't pay for your medication in social democracy. In socialism, it probably would. But in social democracy, no. It is somewhat subsidized. Like, there's some price control, so it's not as crazy expensive as it is in America. But it's still damn expensive, and the government pays a small subsidy so to lessen the prices a little bit, but it's still a lot, and they decreased the amount of money the government pays just this year. Medication is expensive. Okay, so social democracy, it kinda still keeps all the problems. Capitalism, it just kinda minimizes them. But definitely worst thing about social democracy is the following. Social democracy is a utopian ideology that cannot work. Finland is among the top, like, best social democracies, probably. Social democracy in Finland and in other countries, in other European countries, is being destroyed. It's going away. It is not a system that can sustain itself indefinitely. We had it, and it used to be pretty good, and now it's getting worse and worse every year. Ever since 2008, since the financial collapse, since the collapse of global capitalism, we have been in austerity. We haven't really had proper growth, so we have been in austerity. But really, the austerity and the capitalist crisis, it's really been used by the ruling class as an excuse to privatize everything and cut all the social programs and defund the public sector. It's been an excuse to do that. We don't really need to do that. Like, let's be honest, we have the money. Like, it's ridiculous. They just this year, they're gonna buy, like, new fighter planes and new tanks and, like, all kinds of things like that. So we got the money. It's just, like, where you wanna spend the money on. Like, do you wanna take care of people, or do you wanna buy more fighter planes so you can cooperate with the American imperialists more? Because that's another thing that's been going on. Like, the ruling class in Finland really tries to push hard to make us go and join NATO. And most of the people don't want to do that, but they're pushing really hard to make that happen. And Finland is already cooperating, like, in, I think it's called the Arctic Challenge. It's the upcoming military drill, like the massive military drill that's gonna happen with Finland, Sweden, the USA, and I don't remember what they called the one where they had, like, battleships on the Baltic Sea, but all that. Like, Finland is cooperating with the US in all of those. So it's really horrible. But that's where the money is going. Not to mention we're paying, like, crazy amounts of money to the EU and to, like, German banks. And we're, of course, like, the taxes on the capitalists are low, so they can make crazy profits. But they're saying we don't have the money, so cut everything. Cut social programs and everything. So now, there's this really big reform coming, which, it's really, like, Orwellian. Like, I hate Orwell, but the term Orwellian fits this perfectly, because it's such, like, crazy nonsense. Like, there's this new, huge reform coming in Finland, where they said that, yeah, we're gonna have this reform, and it's gonna cut costs, ensure that everybody gets the proper care, and ensure that the services are still going to be there, ensure that they're good quality for everyone, and ensure that it cuts costs. Okay, now the experts have been saying that once this reform is going to go through, it's going to, surprise, surprise, not ensure that the services are still going to be there for everyone. It's probably going to increase differences in quality for people and increase unfairness, and it's probably going to increase costs for the government. So it's not going to do any of the things they say it's going to do. And people have been, like, the liberals, the social democrats, they've been criticizing this heavily. They've been saying, like, whoa, what is this reform that's not going to do any of the things you say it's going to do? because they're liberals, they're naive, they still come from the expectation that that's really what this reform is even about. This reform is not about any of that. Certainly it's not about, like, making sure that people have healthcare. No. And it's not even about cutting costs. Cutting costs is like the biggest, like, excuse, but it's not about that. It's about privatizing healthcare. That's what it's really about. Because social democracy is going away. It's not going to be here anymore. It's going away. They're going to privatize healthcare. There's a term they've been using. They call it the neoliberals, the most right wing of the ruling class parties. They are calling it, and everybody else has pretty much started using the term too, which is sad. They're calling it the freedom of choice model. What does that mean? It means that anybody can, if we privatize healthcare, or to be specific, they don't want to privatize all healthcare, because people would be up in arms about that. Instead, what they want to do is they want to boost up the private sector. So at the moment we have a private sector alongside public sector healthcare. So they want to destroy and cut and defund the public one and boost up massively the private one. So eventually the private one is just going to overtake the public sector. But they're saying that it's a freedom of choice model. Everybody needs to have a choice, right? You're in favor of choice, like you're in favor of freedom, right? So the freedom to choose is you are free to choose if you want to take good quality private sector healthcare, which is typically close to people, it's good quality, and you don't have to wait for very long to get it. Only there's one catch. It costs money. It costs a lot of money. Or you can choose to take the public option. So it's defunded, it's been destroyed by the government, by the right-wingers in power, so it's of poorer quality because there's less doctors, they're crazy busy, there's longer waiting times, and they're centralizing it more and more, so they're like shutting down smaller local clinics and centralizing all the functions to fewer and fewer bigger hospitals. So it's harder for people to get to them, and it takes longer to get to them. So you can choose, like, do you want to take the shitty healthcare or do you want to take the good healthcare? Only problem, if you don't have any money, you have no choice. There's no choice. So that's the kind of choice that they're offering. So, social democracy, it was only possible for a brief period of time as a byproduct of communism. Social democracy cannot sustain itself on its own. When the Soviet Union was extremely powerful, and the Eastern European countries, socialist countries, the socialist camp of countries was extremely powerful. It was rivaling the capitalist world. And the capitalists in the 60s thought that the socialists were going to overtake them. They started doing things. When the Soviets gave women and all the ethnicities the right to vote, that put more pressure on the capitalists to do the same. When the Soviets provided free healthcare and free education, that put more pressure on the capitalists to do something along those lines. Not as good, but at least something, you know? And because the Soviet Union was right next door in Finland and the Scandinavian countries, Europe in general, the Eastern European countries were right there, and the communist parties in every country, they were powerful. They could have won the elections or come to power in other ways, so the capitalists thought, we need to make concessions, we need to make compromises. So in Finland in the 60s, for example, we had less unemployed people back then than we have today, but the government, they made a special law, like an emergency law, and they created infrastructure projects to employ massive amounts of people, because they thought, like, oh shit, there's unemployed people, they're gonna get mad and they're gonna support the communists and maybe, like, do something. So the government started doing things to make capitalism more tolerable for people, so they wouldn't support communism. And that is really the story of social democracy summed up. Social democracy is a way for the capitalists to fool the people and try to stop them from supporting actual change. And immediately, when the Soviet Union went away in 1991, immediately Finland became much, much more right-wing. Immediately. Like in the 60s, 70s, 80s, we had all these concessions from the capitalists, so, life was pretty tolerable. We had good economic collaboration with the Soviet Union and the Eastern European countries, so money was fucking pouring in. And we had a neutral foreign policy. We didn't support the West, but then again, we still weren't a socialist country, so we were a neutral country. So, perfect, right? But now, immediately in the 90s, Finland joins the European Union, so the European Union is a capitalist free trade organization, most of all. So it eliminates national borders so that capital can move from country, capital and money can move from country to country with no controls or regulations. So you can take all that money, invest it someplace, and take all the profits to like a tax haven or whatever. It also eliminates national borders for labor, so you can move cheap labor from other countries. And that is really what the immigration thing is about. Like right-wingers, they complain about immigration, but unless you get out of the capitalist EU, you're never going to do anything about it, because the national governments in the EU don't have control over these things. It's the EU that decides these things. Same with the refugees, like, we don't really have much choice in the matter. So I don't have a problem with taking refugees, but even if I had a problem, we couldn't really do anything about it as long as we are in the European Union. So Finland joins the European Union, starts talking about joining NATO. Thankfully it hasn't happened yet. There was like massive debates about it in the 90s, like, yeah, let's join NATO, let's join NATO. Let's become a total puppet of the US in every possible regard. No, thank you. Like, that's what it was so great in the golden age of Finnish social democracy, because we were an independent country. We were truly independent. We were not a puppet of the West. But now, because social democracy is not sustainable, it's all going to change. We have lost our independence. We have lost our economic independence. We are being forced to become a military puppet of the West. Our public sector and all our services are crumbling, absolutely crumbling. The Finnish education system is often said like it's the world's best education system. Well, that is about to change. Healthcare is the thing where you can really see how it's absolutely crumbling. They're destroying it. Like, of course, for pensioners and old people who can't live alone, they need some kind of care, who have to be in like government institutions to be taken care of. They have it the worst, because those places are so understaffed, underfunded. There's cases of people being forgotten for days, like malnourished, like covered in their own shit, basically. I mean, I'm talking quite literally. Absolutely literally. Covered in their own shit, like malnourished, because the people, the staff can't take care of all of them, because they don't have the time, or they forget them or something. And there's like quite an epidemic of suicides among old people in like retirement homes and places like that, committing suicide because they're so lonely and because because everything is shit. There's nothing to do. Typically there's food sucks, the care sucks, like everything is bad. And that's unacceptable, but that's what happens in social democracy. Like, in a way, homeless people are another, and mentally ill people are another segment of the population that's kind of like that. That it's a small enough segment of the society. It's such a small amount of people, really, that, or in some other ways they're disabled, so they can't really challenge the system. So it's like the capitalists, they want to bribe the workers and the middle class and whatnot, but they don't really care about those other people. Like, it doesn't really much matter to them what the immigrants think, or what the retired people think, or what the mentally ill people think. It doesn't really matter, because those people, they have no power, and they can't really even impact elections that much. So they're like really just forgotten and let to rot, because we're still living in capitalism, and capitalism doesn't care about people, it just cares about itself. So social democracy is a strategy to keep capitalism going.